So welcome back to another episode of Teach Traffic. I am your host, Alana Wexler. And today we've got an interesting podcast. I've brought on a guest called Andrew Faris from 4x400. And 4x400 is, I think you could call it an agency, Andrew, that really, specializes. They're uniquely different because they own and operate their own e-commerce brands. And I recently read an article, which, Andrew, I believe you wrote, detailing your experience and journey with acquiring a brand, growing it to a very large size, and then selling it. And you really outlined that journey that had me very intrigued, and I thought, I'm going to bring you on today's podcast if you're willing, and you were kind enough to say yes, so thank you, to really share your journey and break it down for our listeners. And the key components, I guess, I'd really love to talk to you about today is, obviously, this is a success story, and everyone loves success stories, and we all love breaking down and dissecting success stories, which we are going to today. But before we hit record as well, you've sort of touched on the fact that there have been some e-commerce brands that have completely flopped and failed. And maybe at the end of the show, we can also talk about your learnings of what has not worked in the past, because I'm a big believer in not always just focusing on things that work, and we can all learn from things that work, but it's also a really good learning experience to think about things that don't work. And as we were saying before we hit record as well, that business owners, like, it's just a constant journey of things not working. Not constant, hopefully the good
pretty constant, at least for me. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't work.
Some days it feels pretty constant. So yeah, thank you so much for taking time out of your day and agreeing to come on this show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Alana.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. Alrighty, so what we're going to talk about is, as I said, your journey. Excuse me. Acquiring this particular product. Do you want to maybe tell us how you came across this product and what the product was?
Yeah. So maybe I'll back up a little bit from there. So I always try to explain the relationships between the companies here to people, and it gets confusing. So try and track with me the best you can. Common Thread Collective is an agency, traditionally just kind of a traditional marketing agency, used to specialize in paid social. Now is a full service ad agency based originally in Southern California. Now in the COVID world, we're fully remote like everybody else. So Common Thread Collective, CTC, at some point when I was there a couple of years ago now, a few of us kind of looked around at each other and said, like, we're spending all of this money, other people's dollars, on, advertising and building sites and email and kind of doing all this stuff for all these clients. Why don't we try and do it for ourselves and see if we could win bigger on our own brands? So a few of us, and really this is kind of before I was super involved in this part of things. I was the head of strategy at CTC, and a few of the partners kind of launched off 4x400. And 4x400 is a separate entity from CTC, but is a holding company for e-commerce brands. So instead of just doing agency services, we fully acquire, fully operate the brands, take majority stakes in them. Our mission is to help entrepreneurs achieve their dreams. So our deal structure is that we acquire brands and we don't acquire 100% ownership. At least right now, we're thinking about all kinds of ways to make these relationships work better in the future. But right now, the way we have operated is to help entrepreneurs achieve their dreams by saying, you bring your brand at a very, very small stage, relatively speaking, like less than 500 grand in revenue, and actually really less than 300, and so far mostly about 100 in revenue when we get these brands, and then we can try to supercharge them. Basically, surround you with a team that can operate the brand. Sometimes the founder stays in, sometimes they don't. Operate the brand and then try to grow it to be something bigger than what you could imagine. A lot of times it's hired entrepreneurs, people who've been at it for 8 to 10 years. They've kind of plateaued. They've built a real business, which I have all the respect in the world for. Even if you can't quite get it to where you want it to, it's very hard. And yet it's not big enough a lot of times for them to really pay themselves seriously. And especially if people started when they're 22 and then now they have a family and stuff, and they can't quite do that anymore. So 4x400 does that. So that's kind of the basic idea. CTC, regular agency, 4x400. a holding company.
Can I just
Go ahead.
ask you
Yeah,
a quick
please.
question on that?
Yeah.
So it's obviously you acquire a portion of a brand that's doing a certain amount in revenue, but probably enough revenue for proof of concept rather than they've got a product that people want to buy.
Well, that's a good segue to what I was going to say, which is that we actually started by thinking we'll build our own brands. We had some experience, a number of us, particularly at QALO, QALO, QALO.com. If you know QALO in the US, QALO was the first, for anybody who sees video, I've got my wedding ring, taking it off here and squeezing it. It's the first big like silicone wedding ring brand. There's a few of those that have popped up since then, like Groove Life and Enso rings and some of that. But QALO was the first big one, and some of our people at CTC, the founder of CTC's brother is the founder of QALO, and so we were all kind of interconnected in that journey. QALO was a crazy success story. Went 0 to 20 million in revenue in a year and a half with no funding. It was insane. So that's where I learned digital advertising, was at QALO, and it's just a roller coaster. It was a crazy ride. So we thought, we'll go build more brands. Like that went well. We'll go do this again. So at that time, launched a brand called Opening Day Supply Company, and Opening Day was like sports themed baby goods, like everything from onesies to bibs to whatever else.
Okay. Yep.
And it was a disaster. Like we never even found the beginning of product market fit, really. Like margins were terrible. We just did a million things wrong and realized there's much more starting a brand than we were, even with our experience at QALO. I think that was kind of an outlier success story, and just realized like we did a lot of things wrong. No worries. That's like part of the journey, right? We made a lot of mistakes and paid a lot of money, but what we got in return for that money was a bunch of intellectual capital. We learned a ton in that process. And
you want to maybe expand on what you did learn?
Yeah, well, the first thing we learned is that we shouldn't start brands. One thing we realized is that like we just didn't. It's just not really what we had spent most of our time doing despite the QALO journey. Most of our time had been spent growing brands. We really were on the CTC agency side of things, in brands that were in the we really loved the $1 million to $20 million part of the journey. Right. And even before $1 million in revenue when we first started, because when you're a new agency, you take all comers, anybody who will pay you to do work. You just take their money and do whatever they ask you to do. Yeah. So because that's how starting an agency works. So that got us involved with a lot of different agencies, or with a lot of different brands. And what we realized is that's where we'd really spent. That's where our deepest, sharpest expertise was. That we actually needed to take some more time, probably not start from scratch so much on building out the operations and logistics and fulfillment and supply chain side of the business, even finance side of the business. Instead, we could sort of import some of that stuff. So that changed. That meant a huge shift for us. And that was the biggest thing we learned was, why don't we instead say, let's go get early stage brands that are not too expensive, frankly, to buy, because they're just too small, often not profitable really at all. And why don't we try to supercharge those brands ourselves? And that was what led to the first couple brands, including the one that you referenced, which is FC Goods. So that's kind of the beginning of the journey. And that, I think, is helpful. And then since then, we have acquired 6 more brands, one of which you referenced, FC Goods, which I can talk more about. We sold, and that's the first exit we've had from any of our brands. Where we actually did have some success, grew it, and sold it. And in the midst of that, I would say we banked a bunch more intellectual capital. I've learned a ton more in that process. I actually wasn't even involved so much in the opening day part of things, but then I came over, and now I moved from the agency side to I run 4x400. So
So let's unpack your journey with FC Goods, which is obviously the article that I referenced, and you really broke that down. As a starting point, though, did you find that product, or did they approach you?
Yeah, so FC Goods, FC is short for Fielder's Choice. You're in Australia. There's not as much baseball played there, I know, as there is here in the US. Yeah, well, there's the Australian Professional Baseball League, which I would love to come watch sometime in person, because I'm a huge baseball fan. So you telling me it's non-existent means I'm getting a sense for how much of a big deal it is over there. I understand.
In my world, at least.
No, of course, microscopic. Yeah, no. Yeah. Anyway, not a ton of baseball played there, I know, but baseball in the U.S. is obviously not only a big sport, but it's a really nostalgic sport. It's just filled with, you know, the American pastime kind of idea, right? It's filled with meaning and story and all this in ways that evoke deep emotion from people. So FC Goods was a brand that was founded as a hobby business by a friend, sort of a friend of a friend from one of our other partners, Taylor Holiday, managing partner actually at 400. Taylor's friend came to him, gave him a birthday gift, and the birthday gift was this wallet that was made out of an actual old vintage baseball glove. It turned out this guy was making in his garage these wallets made out of old baseball gloves, and selling them kind of onesie twosie, you know, just sort of selling them off to friends and stuff like that. Well, as this kind of thing goes, it's a really cool idea that he's turning old baseball gloves, which are this like incredibly, like I said, like meaning rich, nostalgic product to baseball people. Taylor, who he sold the product to, played some professional baseball in the US. Like he was a really, really accomplished baseball player, relatively speaking, in the minor leagues, and just like a baseball fanatic. Taylor and I, our relationship was founded a lot on our mutual love for baseball. So anyway, so it meant the product, we both could see it. We both could feel like, oh, this is cool. We love this. We understand exactly what the appeal is. The leather working was really cool and really good and beautiful. And so this product was great. And the founder, whose name is John, though, was shutting it down. He was getting more interest than he could really deal with by doing this himself, making these wallets in his garage, but not enough to be a real business. So he was just like, okay, I'm done with this. Like, I'm just not going to keep doing it. And he was shutting it down. And so that then created a conversation where it was like, hey, don't shut it down. Instead of doing that, why don't you let us see if we can scale it, turn it into something, actually go find somebody to do this work at some more scale, a manufacturer who can do this, and see if we can do that. And that launched the journey. That was in the middle of 2018.
So you kind of stumbled on this product, really. It sounds like, by merely receiving this gift. Like, had you not received this gift, you wouldn't have known it existed, and you wouldn't have known that he was going to shut it down. It's a bit of a fluke.
Yeah, no, totally. That's totally right. Absolutely. It just kind of fell into our lap in that respect.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. So what about the product ticked a lot of boxes for you that you thought you can see a trajectory with this?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. One of them was, like I said, we are baseball people. So we like understood exactly the appeal in this product.
You are the target customer, really.
Yeah. I mean, the wallets were expensive, so like I personally am too cheap to have bought one. But if somebody would have gifted me one, I would have absolutely loved it. So I just completely understood the appeal.
Like a good,
that was
great
definitely
gift item.
Yeah, and that ended up being important throughout the journey of that brand. What we actually did. So that was one thing. By the way, the other thing was it was cheap. And so we were still in proof of concept phase. I mean, the business barely existed. So we could acquire it. We paid $5,000, which was basically paying for a logo and a concept. In 2018, we paid $5,000 for the business. And so it was like, okay, we can play with this and test out this next idea. Now we had to go buy inventory and stuff after that, of course, and do a bunch of work on it, which all those things cost money. But in terms of the actual price of acquisition, we bought 80% of it for $5,000. So those two things were like, okay, if we can make any business work, like a bunch of digital marketers who are baseball obsessed, crazy people who like totally understand this product, this is probably the one. And so we took a shot. There were some other things that we liked, and this is definitely an element that became important to us, which was landed margin was definitely an element here that we probably one of the biggest learnings for us from opening day was that we did not focus enough on creating high gross margin products. But man, in e-commerce, it is such a difference maker. Like, it's just, what you get by going direct to consumer and what you get back in margin by not having a store, in some ways you have to give right back because you have to pay for traffic. Like, you just do. And so you're going to pay advertising dollars for traffic, and so that's going to eat into your margin. And so what's so crucial is that you can get the product to the customer at a reasonable number. And what we realized was that we could set a price for this product, and given the price of leather, and even for good quality leather work and stuff, like we could maintain pretty good margins there. And there's two elements of that. There's the actual product, the gross margin on the product itself, but then there's also the cost of delivery, which is another really important thing. We use the the phrase value to weight ratio a lot, which is just to say like the average order value relative to the weight of the product. A product that doesn't cost very much money to buy, but it's very heavy, is bad value to weight ratio, right? Because you're going to have to pay into shipping heavy products. We actually have this problem with another one of our brands that we acquired early on, and before we kind of really learned that lesson, where the product is not particularly expensive, but it's heavy. And so it creates all kinds of gross margin challenges that we've fought with for the years that we've owned it. So
and this
FC goes the opposite. It's a small wallet in a small box. It's thin. It's the leather working and the leather and the baseball gloves, all those things are not insanely cheap or anything, but we were able to get the landed margin to around 65 to 70 points, depending on the offer we were running. And that ended up being strong. Not incredible margins, but strong.
It's interesting that you mentioned this, the value to the weight ratio. Like, I think that's particularly true in a country like the United States, where as an outsider, I look at the Americans they will not pay for shipping. I think Amazon Prime has conditioned people to not pay for shipping. And I remember I once ran an experiment where I was running ads for free plus shipping, right, versus cost product with free shipping, same out of pocket money. So it was like, let's say it cost $10, but they would not pay for shipping. I'm not paying $5 for ship or $10 for shipping yet, but the product's free. Doesn't matter. They will pay $10 for the product with free shipping versus free product but $10 shipping. No way, they're not paying for shipping. So
yeah, this does not surprise me what you're saying. It's a huge deal. I mean, just negotiating shipping costs and shipping timelines and keeping people happy with that sort of thing is a massive factor that we continue to. I mean, we're at 4400. We are working very hard right now on continuing to make that a real efficiency of ours. When we started the holding company, for us, like what we thought was we can build this tactical marketing powerhouse. That was where all of our experience was, and I think we're really, really good. Really good there. But we're increasingly trying to say, like, we could actually create also as our brand portfolio grows and as we ship more products and those kinds of things, could we actually also create some more efficiency around making this a real area of strength for us, where we can get products to customers fast and pretty and cheap, essentially. So yeah. But FC Goods in the early stages was great because you could take it to a 3PL, third-party logistics company, right? Ship it through somebody, and it didn't take up tons of shelf space because, again, it's just a wallet. And they could ship it to people pretty cheap. It's an expensive premium product. The price range there, the average order value for that product is like around $140, I think, depending on seasonality and stuff. Yeah. So somebody buying a $140 wallet, like, you're going to try and give them some white glove experience, really make sure that it gets there pretty fast, and a really good premium gifting experience, all that kind of stuff. So we put some time and money into the packaging and all that kind of stuff too. So, but at the end of the day, not expensive to ship. So you could do some of that.
I'm curious if you think that $140 price average order value is kind of the sweet spot, enabling you then to really spend a decent amount of money on acquiring traffic, or was that just a by the by?
Yeah, I have a difficult relationship with sweet spots and benchmarks like this. One of the most common questions I get, I think, is like, is this good? Or what is good? When talking about AOV or CPC or kind of any of these metrics that people use. There is probably a limit on the edges here. Like, at some point, it's tough to utilize a tool like Facebook ads or other programmatic advertising tools. It's hard to use those with products that are too expensive because it takes so long to get conversion data that it's really, it's just so expensive to test anything and
they can't then optimize for the conversion.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Statistical significance takes forever to get to, right? And on the low end, if your price is too low, it's just challenging because traffic gets expensive. CPMs have gone up. Everybody knows over the last bunch of years. But like you just told me, right? You just ran an offer of free plus shipping, and at least that in some world that was viable in some way, right? That's about as low of an AOV as you can get. And if you can do it right, it's viable. So the AOV is less of the concern for me. The metric I think I prefer is RPC, revenue per click, which is because AOV also has a trade-off with your conversion rate, right? Like as AOV goes up, typically conversion rate goes down. Everybody kind of understands this intuitively. You're going to convert less customers on $1,000 product than you are on a $10 product. Again, that's the magic of the free plus shipping kind of idea is you're going to convert incredible percentages of your traffic. Theoretically, unless you're in America, like you said.
Unless you're in America.
Yeah.
And they won't pay $10 for shipping.
Right. Yeah. So, so if you get more AOV, you often, the cost of the AOV is the conversion rate. And the opposite is true too. As conversion rate goes up, AOV goes down. So AOV times conversion rate is revenue per click. And if you just roll those up together, right, now you know like what is the actual value of a click to you. And that's the metric that I think is more helpful because at a high RPC, then you're likely to be able to generate traffic. And I actually just literally was in recording my podcast, just detailing every possible bit of context I could come up with on the metric RPC. I came up with 17 different ways you could affect RPC. There's probably way more. But everything from traffic source to demographics to what your offer is to how your landing page is designed, right? There's a million things, cross sells, upsells, price, product market fit. There's device, huge factor. Yeah. So all those things are factors in that. And so the game is, to me, constantly figuring that out. Now, all that said, FC Goods at a high AOV converted a relatively high amount of traffic. I think our RPC sat around $2.50, which is like pretty good. So I don't know that that's spectacular, but from the metrics that I've seen for a young business that was buying lots of its traffic fresh, I think it was pretty good. So
relying on organic traffic.
Yeah.
And no, I'm curious.
The one thing I'll say there really fast to put a button on the earlier conversation is at $150 AOV, the shipping price doesn't change. So that is the nice thing there is like, if you do have to charge $5 for shipping, and actually the vast majority of our orders, we ship free because of the price point and stuff. But if you do have to charge a little bit, or if you have to pay a little bit for shipping rather, not charge a little bit, if you have to pay a little bit for shipping, it's not really killing your margins. It's a couple percentage points and it's not the end of the day, not the end of the world.
Yep.
So
I'm curious for you to expand on the type of ad campaigns that you launched straight away. I would imagine, you have acquired this brand that obviously wasn't getting much traffic. It was going to be retired or just sort of the business was going to be closing. So you've got I kind of use the analogy in sort of my, training material that like getting a brand off the ground or getting anything off the ground is kind of like getting a kite off the ground, like trying to get the initial bit of wind under the wings. But, it's a very different experience if your kite's already in the air and someone hands you the strings and you can hand it to an 8-year-old kid and they can continue flying the kite, and I kind of view websites with no traffic to websites with existing traffic and momentum and data as kind of that same analogy. So it's hard to get something off the ground brand new. So I'm curious what type of ad campaign, and this is probably an appropriate question for you as somebody who's head of strategy. What was your strategy going in to really sort of get the initial air under the wings of this kite?
Yeah, there's no question. That's what we have to be able to do at 400 is we're going to live and die on our ability to acquire customers profitably at scale because we're buying these very small businesses. So, we started.
Creative is key, I would imagine.
Yeah, totally. So with our background being heavily Facebook ads intensive, we feel really comfortable there. And that being sort of the key thing. I think your analogy is great. I'm going to totally steal that. I'll try to credit you as often as I can remember.
Like gone now.
Yeah. No, that analogy is great. I mean, that's totally the battle is establishing sort of some of that basic fit and basic wind. And so I think a couple things here. So what we did was we started around Father's Day in the US, and we did this really like tug at the heart ad that we had this idea around sort of fathers and sons in baseball. And that's like, very, very baseball kind of thing, sort of dark sunset, moody B-roll of kids on a field hitting baseballs and stuff like that. Not actually, I mean, in some ways a little more story driven than a lot of Facebook ads really move towards now. I actually kind of wonder in retrospect if that ad would have played better on YouTube. YouTube's ad product wasn't quite there at the time, but yeah, so that was the initial idea, and that worked okay. And what we didn't know was just how insanely seasonal the business was going to be. Over time, what we learned was like 80+% of our traffic were buying gifts. So it is heavily gift a gift product. And so we tested early, and we saw some fit there, like pretty much right when we turned ads on. But then over the next 5 months, it really took us some time to be spending less than 60% of our or 60% of our revenue back into ad dollars. Like we were, and that's not, you can't build a sustainable business that way. I mean, I guess you sort of could if your margins are good enough, but it's not the kind of business we're trying to build. So in the early days, though, we're willing to spend a lot of money fast to try to figure out what's going to work and what's not. Test. And so at about the 6th month, we started to see some success. And then over time from there, we were able to iterate. So the total journey of FC Goods was basically a $0 revenue company when we got it, like, effectively. And when we sold it, we had done, it was going to be right up against 3 million last year in revenue. So I think you were very nice to say it was very large. I think that might be a little overstated, but it was a good sized company when we sold it from zero, and we were really excited about it. So the difference from 0 to 3 million, first of all, I don't want to make that sound like we did that in a couple of years and that's great, but like there was about 5 months of like test, try to figure it out, see what works, try to figure it out, see what works, learn. And it did not like go, the kite didn't just go up right away, right? There was a lot of running around on the ground first.
The analogy is really taking life now, isn't it?
Yeah. It's helpful. I'm telling you, it's good. Here's what I'll say that the real unlock for us was, though. The ad that won the biggest for us was an ad where we very simply had a guy, a team member of ours, showing the product up close in a garage, kind of a moody setting. We set it a little bit for sure, but it looks like kind of a leather workroom kind of setting.
Man cave.
Yeah, something like that. Dark wood, all that kind of stuff. And he is holding the wallet up and saying, "This is the classics card case from FC Goods, and you got a good, beautiful shot." This is ridiculous, but this is a phrase we always use. Interspersed with lots of sexy wallet video. What I mean is, like, these wallets show well. They look great on camera because you can see it's an old baseball glove, so it's beautiful, and the craftsmanship. Our manufacturer is so good. They're down in the Dominican Republic, one of the baseball capitals of the world. So there's a little bit of story there as well. And man, these wallets came out beautiful. These guys are really skilled. And so they so we'd show up close on the video, or up close on the product. And then he just explained it. Here's the baseball glove leather, and the rest of it's full grain steer hide. And here's what, if you want to return it, you can customize it like this. And it's just that simple. Guy talking to a camera, showing the product. And what that reinforces to me is that, like, job number one in digital advertising, job number one at every step, all of our biggest wins for FC Goods were about clarity. Just like, ask yourself the question, how do you make it clearer? Because the customer can't, like, FC Goods would sell itself in a store. Like, we probably, if we were better wholesale people, we probably could have built a good sized business doing wholesale FC Goods, because you could pick it up, pick your exact wallet. Everyone's different because they're all from real baseball gloves, right? You could pick it up, look at it, feel it, touch it, turn it around, see the leather crafting, all that kind of stuff, see the packaging. But you can't do that on a website. And so for us, we have to simulate that process as best as we possibly could. And so that's, I think, what that video really did, is it just showed very, very clearly, here is what you're getting, so that maybe it's not the cheapest click in the history of the world, maybe it's not the most riveting ad in the history of the world, but anybody who looked at it and saw it and stayed for the 5 seconds long enough to see the wallet, they knew exactly what it was, and it was beautiful. And then the PDP supported the product page, supported all of that, or landing page supported all of that, showed it to you up close. Here's what it looks like with cards in it and with money in it, all that kind of stuff. And that worked. And I'll go to my grave with that, right? The number one thing to do in e-commerce digital advertising is be clearer. And it's actually a hard skill to develop, to communicate clearly, but that's I think job number one.
Yeah, I love that. And it sounds, it sounds like it's almost like an unboxing type video, just
Totally. Yeah.
simulating that experience for people
Yeah.
as close to the real experience as it possibly can be. So did you write a story copy above that video ad as well, or you just had very small amount of text?
We just captioned it. I mean, again, this kind of breaks the rules of Facebook ads, right? Because like the rule of thumb is that 80% of Facebook and Instagram videos watch without sound. So do the Mashable style thing where you
Yeah,
have the
captions
text on screen and all that stuff, and don't do VO, but it worked for us. So I don't know. I don't know what to make of that. It did work. So yeah.
maybe it's a combination of really good targeting, so you knew your ad was going in front of exactly the right person, and it possibly created some intrigue for that right person that they were willing to turn the sound on.
Yeah, I think in the early stages that's probably true. I'll tell you what, another thing that I believe, and I forgive me if this goes against something that you teach, and if it does, like I totally could be
Go
wrong
for
about
it.
this. So, so yeah, but that just Facebook's algorithm in today's world is so dang good that like, we target pretty broadly, pretty much all the time. I mean, and certainly when I was learning, it was like 1% lookalike everything, tightly exclude everything, like the whole deal. But now it's like we run pretty broad targeting, just a few exclusions, make sure to get past customers out of there, and then expand the interests and expand the reach and let Facebook go find more people like it, because Facebook obviously, I mean, very simply knows way more about the customer than I do. So
Yeah. But that's, touching back on what we were talking about before of getting enough conversion data through your pixel where Facebook
totally.
knows exactly who you want, and there's that balance of like, you got to spend enough money to get enough conversion data through that pixel that you can then use at wider audiences and let Facebook do their thing. And sort of that's the challenge for so many advertisers, I find, is getting to that point is really difficult because it does require a product that people really want and are willing to buy from a Facebook ad at some point, and B, enough budget to justify an average order value and all that kind of stuff.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's totally true.
I'm curious if you use that converting video on YouTube, for example, or any other places.
Yeah, we didn't really, like, we're not
Really?
that good on YouTube.
Yeah, right.
And
I love
we
YouTube.
also at the time didn't have a lot of extra dollars to throw around,
Okay.
and to test with outside of stuff that was a little more exploratory. As we continue to grow, I'm hoping that we can do that more. I mean, we've certainly done some, like, but we just haven't made a major acquisition channel for us. So
Facebook
yeah,
ads was your major acquisition channel. Did you do
yeah, that's
Google search?
that's not because I think it's necessarily best. I mean, it probably is for most e-commerce people, but it's just because we're best. And actually, that's another thing I strongly believe right now is just that, like, there's a million ways to make money in e-commerce if you're good at them. Like, I know people are making real money with affiliate and with these insane automations and email flow. I mean, and we do all of that stuff to some degree. Our automations are good, our retention marketing is good, like all of that stuff. But I know that there are people who are just insane with every possible channel. There's great YouTube advertisers and incredible Amazon people and all of that. But what I believe right now is that, like, there's a constant allure to going and finding the next revenue channel, as people, often salespeople, are out there telling you, go do this. Look at all the money I'm making over here. Da, da, da. And what I think right now is, like, the key really is not so much the channel, but the people. Like, if you can find absolute killers who are just, like, really, really good on a certain channel, then you should probably give them your money and let them optimize that channel for you, or at an agency level, or hire them or whatever. So that's kind of what I'm waiting for YouTube, is like, I'm kind of chasing that down right now with, like, who's the great YouTube person that I know who really I can go, like, you tell me what to do and I'll do it. Because I'm sure if I spent the time, I could figure it out and everything, but I don't want to spend the time. I got too many things to do. And we're doing all right on the other channels. So yeah.
Fair enough. So I'm curious though, if you just relied solely on your Facebook ads to really scale this, the sales for this e-commerce brand.
Yeah, not solely. So customer acquisition, certainly, that was our main way of doing it. We did spend a decent amount of money on categorical search. There are a couple of other baseball glove wallet brands out there. So we had some dollars going towards a decent amount of money over time going towards categorical search on what I would call sort of like mid-funnel terms. So like low mid-funnel. So like terms like baseball glove wallet. Like there is some search volume around that, and I don't know if we created that with our ads mostly or not, but we were definitely bidding on those terms. That traffic is obviously incredibly high ROAS traffic for us. Like if you're searching for a baseball glove wallet and you find our site, we do a really good job. Like so we scooped up as much of that as we could. Same with some Google Shopping, like PLAs on that. And then we definitely ran some display as well. I'm like the last guy standing. I don't know what your world is like, but I'm like fully a believer that there's a way to make display ads work in the world, that they're not dead and all that.
Oh, totally. So, I love display.
Yeah. Okay, great. That's awesome. Because like all of the people around here mock me for my love of display ads. They're like, nobody clicks on those. And well, that's why they're priced so cheap. So So we definitely had some success there as well. But all of that was supplemental. And then the other thing is like we really built out some product releases and some and an email program and some of that stuff that became significant parts of the revenue over time as well. And just tried to make it a great experience. But I'll tell you, the reason we sold it was because we could never really solve the second product for people to buy. So once people bought one wallet from us, there's just no reason to buy a second one. So our customer LTV was low. And what we got some word of mouth from people who were buying from us. It wasn't enough to make it so that a customer was worth a lot to us after the first purchase. And that really, at some point, you're going to hit a cap on your growth. And if I was awesome on YouTube or something, I could have unlocked another couple $1 million in revenue, but I'm not. And neither was anybody on my team. That's not a shot at anybody. That's just not where we spent our time. So a lot of why we sold it was we thought, let's get to somebody else who can take it to the next stage from where we've gotten it to, and we'll take the cash and invest it in other brands that we're working on, because that's the kind of luxury of having multiple brands.
Yeah, amazing. Sort of lastly, on the success of this FC Goods, what would you say was the biggest turning point for you to really growing and scaling it, I guess, traffic wise as well as anything else?
I think probably the answer to that question was two things. One of them was getting those ads that were just this talking head kind of video. We shot that one day. Actually, we didn't even shoot it as an ad. We shot it to put it on our PDP. We thought, this will help people understand the product.
Interesting.
And I was like, well, we have the content. Why not throw it in an ad and see if it works? It's, might as well test it. And then it's like, it just took off. So, and actually another thing there was like, when we started it and we just did talking head, it did not work. But when we added an intro card that said, just had a little like, it said like vintage baseball gloves, handcrafted wallets. And that's all it said. Just like here's what it is, straightforward. That's just kind of an intriguing thing if you like baseball. Like, what? Baseball glove wallet? And then it went from there, a couple seconds of that, into, his name is Corey, the guy Corey, talking and showing the product. And that really made a huge difference. So that was a lot of the thing that really unlocked it for us, is finding that ad. And we found we got a lot of scale out of that ad. I think that ad is probably still running for FC Goods. And it's still, we tried every which way we could to beat that ad. It didn't work. Another thing, actually,
I just want to add something on that. In my
please.
experience, like, you find a winning ad that works really well for whatever reason, and often it sounds like you've experienced that I've had before, where you could never have predicted the success that ad would have, but you have to test everything, and for whatever reason, it works. And what I find is that once you find something that works, it works incredibly quickly. So this whole adage that you need to give it like a month before you can tell if it's really working, like, instantly if it's working, and equally important, instantly if something is not working. So it's just,
I think that's so true. Like, I think the learning phase on Facebook is real, and and that you do decrease volatility over time as the algorithm locks in and all that stuff. But I think you're completely right about that. Like, it's really rare that I've seen an ad like quote unquote build up data and then suddenly change how it performs. Like, it just doesn't work that way.
I know. And I just find, I don't know, so many agencies say that to people. We need, like, bear in mind, like, maybe Google search campaigns need a while to sort of, hone the negative keywords and all that kind of stuff. But if you're sending enough data through, let's say your Facebook ads, a winning creative, it is like, you sort of wake up one morning and go, what has happened with this ad? Because something is just completely taken off and it works really, really quickly.
I think that's just totally right. Yeah. If somebody says they need time and money to test lots of different ads, then I think yes.
Yes,
but
that's different. Yeah.
But yeah, sitting on one ad and waiting for it to turn around, it's not going to happen unless they're changing the landers like crazy or something like that.
Or changing your targeting completely or something like that.
Right.
Yeah. So, and it also sort of brings to mind as well the importance to really test everything. And I tell my students and clients all the time that, like, I've been proven wrong so many times that I've remained humble. I mean, like, things that I think will kill it don't, and things that I think will do well do, or don't do well do. That we just have to test everything. You don't have to test it for long, because, as I said, pretty quickly. But, if I'm not the target audience, like this, we've just got to test it and let the data talk,
No, look, there's nothing in the world more bankable in digital advertising than that. If I strongly believe an ad or a landing page concept is going to work, that it will not work.
Totally.
I have a pretty good amount of experience at this point, and I am so wrong all the time. But this is the beauty of data, is that the data is the great humbler of everybody. It's like,
the great leveler.
And it's, yeah, totally. And it's so, I actually love this about the world. Like, it's just, it does level the playing field, and people, it's the hardest thing for ad buyers sometimes to get in their heads, and for creatives to get in their heads, is telling somebody who's running creative, like, the ad content is just sitting there. Just try it. Yeah. Just try it. Even if you don't think it will work, I don't care. You know why? Because you are often wrong, and so am I. Man, it is, but it's so true. Like, yeah, it's one of the best pieces of advice I can give somebody. Just try more stuff as fast as you can. Try more stuff.
Yeah, try more stuff, but once you find if it's not working, kill it quickly.
Kill it quickly. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You were going to touch on another takeaway, or have I completely blown that thought out of the water with our segue, which I might have?
What else was I going to say about turning points? Oh, I'll say another thing. On the note of clarity, another thing that we did was we added an image to our PDPs, to our product pages. First, we just put it right below the buy box, basically. And all it was is an image of the wallet, where it had little lines going to the two pieces of the wallet. And one line said vintage baseball glove leather, and then the other line kind of called out to full grain US steer hide. So all it was doing was showing the construction of the wallet, so that when you saw the image, you could see exactly, here's the part of the wallet that's baseball glove leather, here's the part of the wallet that's just like regular leather, because the wallets were a mix for a number of reasons. So anyway, when we first added that image to the product page, we saw an immediate and significant conversion rate bump. And you have to forgive me, I don't remember the percentage, but it made a big difference right away. Suddenly, people who landed on that page bought a lot more often. And what I believe is that it was like one of the ultimate moments in clarity as a winner. It just made it so that people knew exactly what they were buying the moment that they saw the image, and it communicated quickly, it communicated easily, and it was a really crucial moment. So later on, when we turned that into a video, and those videos of people showing and explaining it, what we did is we just made the thumbnail on the video that same image, so that even if you didn't click play, you still got the same effect, and could see that. So that was another thing that was huge. So it's just another moment of, like, whether it's the landing page, the PDP, the homepage, like the ad, anything, be clear.
It sounds like it's also a process of detective work as well. It's like, well,
it's so true.
Like this work. Okay, how can we apply this to something else? Because if this means that, then it should apply to something else as well.
I think that's I'm going to steal that analogy too.
Okay. And when we started, I said, we could touch on some of your learnings as well from brands that possibly haven't gone nearly as well as FC Goods. You obviously touched on already the cost of shipping. So a low cost item with a high cost of shipping sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Yep.
What are some of your other learnings that you've had from brands that possibly haven't gone according to plan, which is pretty standard in this world?
Yeah. So, well, I think maybe the easiest way to summarize this would be to tell you the 4 things that I look for now when I acquire a brand.
Okay.
Because I've kind of limited that down. The first one, and everything else is secondary to this now to me, is landed margin, which we touched on already. But one, and then a line underneath it before you get to any of the other factors, is landed margin. The reality is high margin makes everything easier. It just makes everything easier. You don't have to be as good on your ads. You can acquire more traffic faster if there's more margin to give. The thing is, too, margin is not something that you're stuck with. It's not fixed. Like there's a lot of ways in which there's a limit to how much margin you can get at any given time. But if your margin is bad, try changing it. And what I mean by that is there's a million things you do. Shop 3PLs to see if you can get your fulfillment costs down. See if you can ship it yourself. Maybe it's cheaper. Like that can be a whole thing to do. Change your price. Try and play with that. Shop manufacturers. See if there's different ways. Take features out of the product that customers don't actually care about anyway. There's just a million. Try bundling products. If you can raise your AOV, then it can, products get a lot cheaper to ship when you add stuff to them, right? The first pick is the most expensive pick. So if you can get 2 items into an order instead of 1, as a percentage, your fulfillment costs go way down and your shipping costs go way down. So there's a million things like that you can try to think of to do. And so knowing that can be really good. And so for us, we look at
is a good landed margin. It's a percentage.
Well, so there you ask my question again, which is a benchmark kind of question. I'm looking for 70 plus.
Wow.
So I want pretty good margins. Yeah. And I'm feeling really good at 80. I've seen, 90, and this is why everybody has a skincare company right now, including us, just because skincare margins are out of this world. So,
or a supplement company.
Supplements and skincare. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So that's number 1 for me above everything else. And there's all these elements of it. One other little thing on margin. One advantage to having shipping taking up more of your margin than the actual product is that you typically are paying for shipping after you've received the money. So on a cash conversion basis, like on a finance basis, it's much easier. So if you have to buy, yeah.
I have a dog that wants to be in when it's out and out wants to be in.
No problem. Okay, so one thing people don't realize about margin too is that if you have a higher, if your margin is disproportionately on the product, you're going to have to pay for the product, even if you have terms with your manufacturer up front, and then sell the product. So from a cash perspective, you're going to tie up working capital in your inventory. Whereas if you're paying typically shipping, you're not paying the shipping until you've received cash from the customer, and it works a lot better in terms of your cash conversion cycle. So this is another advantage, like something like skincare, where the margin on the product is really, really strong. And then maybe if you're shipping moderately heavy bottles of things around and jars of things, that you're actually not paying the shipping until after you've received cash. And so it works really well for your cash conversion cycle. So because otherwise cash gets tied up in inventory. So there's another little lesson from that.
Yeah, nice.
Okay, so 3 other things that I look for in a brand. Number 2, RPC. If I see a brand that has high RPC, I'm excited about it. Anything you can do to make people
click, yes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yep.
That's a good one. And then LTV.
Yep.
People have a hard time. Yes. Sorry. Thanks. I know we live in a world of acronyms, and I'm sometimes bad at explaining them.
For our listeners,
Yeah. All right. High lifetime value. Because what you realize with high lifetime value, particularly, what we look at is not just LTV generally, but on a 60-day window. So what we want to see is what's the 60-day LTV? Because if I have a great LTV, but it takes me a year to recuperate it, like then I have to float a bunch of cash to make up for that whole year. So
You're
it's pretty
preaching
tough.
to the converted here. So many people say that like over a 3-year period, what's a customer worth to you? It's like, no, you've ever tried to run a business with cash flow? You can't budget for that for traffic wise, or
Yeah.
you're going to take 3 years to recoup it.
Yeah, the example I've heard is that at some point I heard the stat that Starbucks is willing to pay $500 to acquire a customer. And that's because the LTV of a Starbucks customer, and certainly my LTV as a Starbucks customer, is well worth more than that. But the difference between you and Starbucks, or me and Starbucks, right, is the giant war chest of cash sitting somewhere that allows you to float the gap in that $500.
Yeah.
And so unless you have Starbucks cash, you can't do that, even if you can make the money on the LTV. So yeah, sorry, we've got slight sounds of a crying child in the background, but work from home life is what it is. Yeah.
Corona life.
Yeah, right. So LTV is another thing. So we look specifically at a 60-day window. We have a proprietary tool that got built that gives you really good visibility to that.
Nice.
So yeah, last one is if somebody has had limited Facebook ad success, that's a good sign for us because we're really good on Facebook. So we feel like we could probably fix it. Yeah. So if you get those things, high RPC, high LTV, and high margin, we think we can, even at only 100,000 in business revenue, if for us, that's a great brand to acquire. So I would say for somebody listening to this, those are the 3 things I'd be trying to fix at any given time. If you can get your margin into a really good spot, if you can make a click worth a lot of money to you, and if you can make a customer worth a lot of money to you, you've got a really good business.
Love it. That's awesome.
That's simple. Just go do that. It's really easy.
Yeah. Just go and do that multiple times with multiple different brands. Easy. Your job is done.
No problem, right?
Happy. No problem.
Yeah. Right. Of course. Actually solving all those is the challenge. So yeah.
Andrew, you've been so generous with your knowledge and your time. Where can people find out a little bit more information about you?
Yeah, sure. So I host a podcast called the E-commerce Playbook Podcast. You can find that anywhere fine podcasts are sold. And what we do on that podcast is I just try to walk people through exactly my journey. We release week of recording. And I will tell you like all the way down to how much cash we have in the bank at a given time. We try to be like relentlessly honest about where we're at, which has included a lot of mistakes and a lot of wins and everything in between. So that comes out every week, E-commerce Playbook Podcast. And probably the other best place to find me is Twitter. If you're not on e-commerce Twitter, you should get there. It's a delightful community. People are so helpful and warm. And so I'm at Andrew J. Faris. Is
e-commerce Twitter a hashtag that you follow?
I don't think so, but there's a couple Twitter lists. Just tweet at me and I'll tell you. I'll tell you where to go. At Andrew J. Faris, or maybe I'll send it to you for show notes here, Alana. And you can. There's a good Twitter list for like 100 people you can just follow. Just like boom.
Yeah,
and you can kind of get in the conversation. It's great. Twitter. People are so generous with their time on Twitter. It's really awesome. If you want to see any more of what we do, it's and see our brands, it's 4x400.com. And if you go to 4x400.com, you'll see all 5 of our brands that are there right now, and you can go check out their sites. And feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to talk.
Awesome.
Yeah, Twitter's probably the best place to do that. Hit me in the DMs.
That's how I found you. So I can attest to Twitter working.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your knowledge. And we'll put links in the show notes and all that.
I really appreciate it, Alana. Thanks for having me. It's fun.
Awesome.